Ethan, my younger brother, always saw our world in black and white, a world divided between success and failure. He chose success, trading his work boots for polished shoes and our family's dusty farm for a gleaming downtown office. Me, I inherited the mud, the sweat, and the endless work of the feedlot. Since Dad passed, the air between us has thickened with a silent resentment, punctuated by Ethan's cutting remarks. "Still playing in the dirt, Jack?" He'd sneer, his custom-tailored suit a stark contrast to my worn denim and, of course, my perpetually muddy boots. He never understood that these boots weren't a symbol of my failure, but a testament to my dedication. He saw a dead-end job. I saw a legacy I was fighting to preserve. The real trouble started a few weeks ago when a cryptic letter from the bank landed in our mailbox. It wasn't the usual payment reminder. It spoke of a looming deadline and an overdue mortgage that didn't make any sense. My hands, calloused and rough, trembled as I read the fine print. Ethan, the man who handled Dad's legal affairs, had convinced me he was taking care of everything. "Trust me, Jack," he'd said with a condescending smile. "It's too complicated for you to understand." I drove into town that morning with a knot in my stomach, the familiar scent of hay and diesel clinging to my clothes. The bank was a world away from the farm, all cold marble and hushed whispers. As I walked in, my muddy boots, a small rebellion against the polished floors, left a trail that made me feel more out of place than ever. I felt a wave of shame, knowing Ethan would have laughed at the sight. My heart pounded, but I knew I had to face this. I was ready to talk to the manager and figure out what was going on. The entire drive I practiced what I would say, what questions I would ask, but the words felt clumsy and hollow. I was a man of action, not of words, and this confrontation felt entirely unnatural. Yet, as I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the bank, I was driven by a deep sense of responsibility. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for Dad's memory and everything he had built. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. The bank manager, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Hayes, sat behind a large mahogany desk, her expression as unyielding as the wood itself. She gestured for me to sit, her eyes flicking down to my boots for a fraction of a second before returning to my face. I could feel the judgment in her silence. "Mr. Jensen," she began, her voice crisp and formal, "I understand you're here about the loan." I nodded, the words catching in my throat. I explained that I'd been making the payments diligently, but the letter suggested otherwise. A strange look crossed her face, a mix of confusion and slight pity. "Mr. Jensen, there seems to be a misunderstanding. Your brother, Ethan, renegotiated the terms of the loan a few months back. He told us you were fully aware and in agreement with the new conditions." My stomach dropped. Ethan had done what? A cold anger started to burn in my chest, a fire that had been smoldering for years finally igniting. The new terms, she explained, included a massive balloon payment due in just 30 days. It was a sum I couldn't possibly pay. It was a trap, a calculated move by my own brother to force me out. He wanted the land for himself, to sell it to developers and finally get rid of the dirty family business he despised so much. The weight of his betrayal hit me like a physical blow. The farm, Dad's legacy, was in jeopardy, and the man I trusted most had put it there. The anger quickly gave way to a chilling fear. The thought of losing everything, the land, the animals, the life I had poured my soul into, was unbearable. I felt a sense of urgency. I had to find a way to fix this, and time was running out. I left the bank in a daze, the city's noise suddenly feeling overwhelming. My mind raced with the implications of Ethan's actions. Every moment I had spent working the land, every lesson Dad had taught me, felt like it was being erased by this one act of pure greed. I clutched the bank letter in my hand, the crisp paper feeling like a condemnation. The 30-day deadline wasn't just a number, it was a ticking clock on my life's work, a countdown to the end of everything I held dear. Leaving the bank, the afternoon sun felt mercilessly bright. My mind was a whirlwind of rage and panic. Ethan's office was only a few blocks away, a fortress of glass and steel that screamed success at anyone who passed. The doorman, a stiff man in a dark suit, eyed my boots with suspicion but let me pass. The ride up the elevator felt like an ascent into a different world, a world where the smell of polished leather replaced the scent of earth and livestock. When I reached his floor, I saw him, through the glass walls of his corner office, a picture of professional poise, laughing on the phone. My heart was a drum of fury against my ribs. He hung up and saw me, his smile instantly fading. "Jack, what are you doing here? You're tracking mud all over the place." He didn't even stand up. His disdain was a tangible thing. "The bank," I started, my voice tight with controlled anger. "The mortgage, what did you do, Ethan?" He leaned back in his chair, a look of bored superiority on his face. "I did what was necessary, Jack. Dad's business was failing. I secured a new loan to keep it afloat, a temporary measure, obviously. You wouldn't have understood the paperwork." His words were a condescending wave, dismissing my entire life's work. He saw the farm as a burden, a relic that needed to be liquidated, not a living, breathing part of our family. I told him about the balloon payment, about the 30 days. He didn't flinch. "Yes, I know," he said, as if it were a minor detail. "I was planning on selling the back 40 to cover it. It's the only logical option. The land is worth a fortune." He was talking about the best pasture, the one Dad had worked his whole life to improve, the one with the best grass and the most fertile soil. Selling it would be a betrayal of Dad's entire legacy. His cold calculation chilled me to the bone. He didn't care about the farm, only the profit it represented. I stared at him, my brother, a stranger in a tailored suit, and for the first time I felt not just anger but a profound sadness for what we had lost. The brother I had once looked up to, who had shared a childhood of long summers and hard work with me, was gone. In his place was this cold, calculating professional who saw the farm as nothing more than an asset to be sold off. The bond of family, I realized, was a fragile thing, easily broken by ambition and greed. I stumbled out of Ethan's office, the cold air from the building hitting me like a physical shock. The city, with its deafening roar and endless concrete, felt hostile and foreign. I got back in my truck and just drove, not really seeing the road, my thoughts a jumbled mess of betrayal and desperation. Ethan's plan to sell the back 40 was a knife to the heart. It was the best grazing land, the one Dad had always called the soul of the farm. Losing it would cripple the operation beyond repair. My father had taught me that a good farmer takes care of his land, and selling off the best part of it was the ultimate betrayal. I felt a deep sense of responsibility to uphold that value, to honor his memory. I drove until the city lights faded in my rearview mirror and the familiar open fields of home appeared. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the fields, the very fields Ethan was so eager to sell. I parked by the barn, the smell of hay and the lowing of the cattle a comforting presence. This was my life, my world. I couldn't let him take it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The 30-day deadline was a relentless clock in my mind. I needed help, but who could I turn to? I had always been the one to fix things, the one to take care of the heavy lifting. Now, I felt utterly alone. The next morning, I was back in town, but this time I wasn't heading to the bank or Ethan's office. I was driving to Old Man Henderson's place. Mr. Henderson was a retired farmer, a lifelong friend of my father's, a man whose wisdom was as deep as his wrinkles. He'd seen a lot in his time, and I needed his counsel. As I pulled up to his porch, I saw him sitting in his rocking chair, a quiet sentinel watching the world go by. I had no idea if he could help, but I had to try. I walked up the creaking wooden steps, the familiar scent of pipe tobacco and old wood filling the air. Mr. Henderson looked up, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He didn't say a word, just motioned for me to sit on the step. I took a deep breath, preparing to tell my story, knowing that in this man, I might find the understanding and guidance I so desperately needed. He was a link to a past that was slipping away, a past that held the key to saving my future. Enjoying the story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. Mr. Henderson listened patiently as I poured out the whole story, from Ethan's mockery to the shocking discovery at the bank and his plan to sell the back 40. He didn't interrupt, just rocked slowly, the creak of his chair a rhythmic beat in the silence. When I finished, The weight of the confession lifted slightly, but the fear remained. He looked at me, his eyes sharp and clear despite his age. "Your father was a stubborn man, Jack, but he was also a smart one." He paused, leaning forward. "He knew what was coming. He knew the pressure on small farms was getting worse, and he knew about Ethan." My heart sank. So Dad had known about Ethan's true nature all along. He then told me about a fund my father had secretly been building, a small nest egg set aside for emergencies. It was an investment in a local co-op that had been a passion project of Dad's for years. He had told Mr. Henderson about it, trusting him to keep the secret. He'd even given him a key to a safe deposit box at a different, smaller bank on the outskirts of town. "He figured Ethan would go straight for the main accounts," Mr. Henderson said, with a small, knowing smile. "He was always 2 steps ahead of that boy." He handed me a small tarnished key. The metal was cold in my hand, but it felt like a jolt of hope. The instructions were simple. Go to the bank, open the box, and find what was inside. It wasn't a fortune, Mr. Henderson warned, but it was something. It was a lifeline. I felt a surge of gratitude for Dad, for his foresight and his unwavering faith in me. He had not only given me the farm, but he had also left me the means to fight for it. It was a test of my resilience, a final lesson from beyond the grave. With the key in my hand, the 30-day deadline no longer felt like a countdown to disaster, but a challenge I might just be able to meet. The conversation with Mr. Henderson had given me more than just information. It had given me a sense of purpose. I wasn't alone in this fight. My father, in his own way, was still here, guiding me. I stood up, the old man's words ringing in my ears, and felt a quiet resolve settle over me. The path forward was still unclear, but at least now I had a path. The small community bank was a world away from the sterile formality of the one I'd visited before. It felt like a place built on trust and handshakes. The bank teller, a kind older woman who knew my father, didn't even flinch at my muddy boots. She recognized the key and led me to the safe deposit box. With a quiet click, the box slid open, revealing its contents. Inside, nestled amongst some old family photos, was a stack of papers and a small leather-bound journal. The papers were a mix of stock certificates and legal documents for the co-op my father had helped create. It wasn't a massive pile of cash, but the value of the shares and the journal's content were a game-changer. The journal wasn't just a diary, it was a meticulous record of Dad's finances, his plans, and most importantly, his vision for the future of the feedlot. He had detailed a plan to expand the business, not through land but through technology and efficiency. He'd foreseen the shift towards more sustainable, smaller-scale operations and had a detailed blueprint for a new, more efficient feeding system and a direct-to-consumer delivery service. The journal was filled with his meticulous calculations and sketches, a clear path to not just saving the farm but making it thrive. The most important document, however, was a formal legal letter drafted by Dad himself, outlining my full ownership of the feedlot and detailing how the shares and this plan were to be used to secure its future. The letter also made it clear that Ethan had no legal claim to the property or its assets. Reading his words, I felt a deep connection to him, as if he was right there with me. It was more than just money. It was a blueprint, a mission. The shame and fear I had felt before were replaced with a steely resolve. Dad had armed me with the tools to fight back. He had not only trusted me to keep the farm running, but he had also entrusted me with the vision to make it grow. The deadline was still looming, but now, instead of dread, I felt a powerful sense of purpose. I had a path forward, and it was one that honored every inch of the land, every lesson he had taught me, and every muddy boot I had ever worn. With the journal and documents in hand, I felt a newfound confidence. The plan was clear. Use the co-op shares as collateral for a new loan, one that would cover the balloon payment and give me the capital to implement Dad's expansion plan. But I couldn't do it alone. I called my friend, Sarah, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who ran her own successful small business. She had always been a quiet supporter of the farm and a voice of reason. I met her at a local diner, the smell of coffee and stale donuts a familiar comfort. As I laid out the journal and Dad's plan, her eyes lit up. She saw the same potential I did, recognizing the genius in his foresight. "This is brilliant, Jack," she said. tapping a page with a detailed diagram of the new feed system. This isn't just about saving the farm, it's about a complete rebrand, a new business model. Her enthusiasm was contagious. We spent the next week working tirelessly, turning Dad's raw plans into a polished professional business proposal. Sarah handled the financial projections, while I used my years of hands-on experience to fill in the technical details. We were a good team, our different skills complementing each other perfectly. The deadline was a constant reminder, a pressure that kept us focused and motivated. There were late nights fueled by coffee and the shared determination to see this through. We were doing more than just saving a farm, we were building a future. Finally we had it, a comprehensive, airtight business plan backed by Dad's meticulous research and Sarah's modern business acumen. It was a document that reflected the hard work and passion of generations, combined with the smarts of modern business. It was powerful, convincing, and most importantly, it was true. It was a testament to the value of our work, a value Ethan had never bothered to see. It was time to go back to the bank, but not to plead or explain. This time I was going in as an equal, a businessman with a vision, not just a farmer in muddy boots. I was ready to face Ms. Hayes again, armed with more than just a flimsy excuse. I was ready to show her the true value of my work and the true value of my father's legacy. Your subscription is what helps us continue telling stories like this. Subscribe now. I walked into the bank with a clean pair of boots and a briefcase, but I wasn't trying to be someone I wasn't. The boots were still muddy on the inside, a reminder of who I was and where I came from. The briefcase, filled with our proposal, was a symbol of my new purpose. Ms. Hayes greeted me with a neutral expression, but I could see a flicker of surprise in her eyes at my changed demeanor. I didn't waste any time. "Ms. Hayes," I said, placing the briefcase on her desk. "I'm here to discuss a new loan, not the old one." I presented her with our business plan, detailing Dad's vision and how we intended to implement it. I explained how the co-op shares would be used as collateral, ensuring the bank's investment was secure. Her skepticism was palpable at first. She flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed in concentration. But as she read Dad's meticulously detailed notes and Sarah's professional projections, her expression slowly began to shift. She asked pointed questions about the new feeding system, the market research and the direct-to-consumer model. I answered each one confidently, drawing on my deep knowledge of the farm and the industry. I explained the tangible benefits of our plan, not just for the farm, but for the local economy. The conversation was no longer about a desperate plea, but a serious negotiation between two people who understood business. After a long pause, she looked up at me, a genuine smile on her face for the first time. "Mr. Jensen, this is incredibly well thought out. Your father was truly a visionary." She picked up the phone and made a call. After a brief conversation, she turned back to me. "The board has approved your request for a new loan. Not only will this cover the balloon payment, but it also gives you the capital to move forward with your expansion. It's a solid investment." I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees. The deadline was no longer a threat. I had saved the farm, not by selling it off, but by fighting for it and building it up, just as Dad would have wanted. The weight that had been on my shoulders for weeks finally lifted, replaced by a sense of pride and accomplishment. It wasn't just my farm anymore. It was the foundation of a new, sustainable business, a future I had built with my own hands. The news of the loan approval was a triumph I couldn't wait to share with Sarah. We celebrated with a simple meal at the same diner where we had first discussed the plan, toasting our success with black coffee. Her support had been invaluable, a beacon of light during my darkest days. I also called Mr. Henderson, whose quiet chuckle over the phone was all the congratulation I needed. "Your father would be proud, Jack," he said, his voice full of warmth. His words meant more than any praise. I hadn't told Ethan yet. I decided to wait until the loan was finalized, the paperwork signed, and the new mortgage was officially in place. A week later, I went back to the main bank to sign the final documents. As I walked in, I saw Ms. Hayes talking to someone. The man turned around and my heart sank. It was Ethan. He looked at me, a condescending smirk on his face, ready with another jab about my boots, which today were thankfully clean. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Still trying to make a deal you don't understand, Jack." Before I could respond, Ms. Hayes interjected, her voice polite but firm. "Mr. Jensen," she said, addressing me, "I'm glad you're here. Your paperwork is ready." She then turned to Ethan. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jensen, but we're a bit busy at the moment. We've already handled your situation with the old loan. Your brother has taken care of it." Ethan's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of utter confusion. "What are you talking about? He can't handle this." Ms. Hayes smiled, a genuine warm smile. She looked at me, then at Ethan, and then said the words that would echo in my mind forever. "I believe there's been a slight change in ownership. We now have the pleasure of greeting your brother as the sole owner of the feed lot, thanks to his new, more promising and approved business plan." The look on Ethan's face was a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning realization. The ground beneath his feet, the carefully constructed world where he was the successful brother and I was the simple failure, had just crumbled. He was silent, his mouth open slightly, unable to form a single word. He had underestimated me, and in doing so, he had lost everything. Ethan's face went white. The color drained from his expression of smug confidence, replaced by a mixture of shock and disbelief. He looked at me, then at Ms. Hayes, and back at me, as if trying to process the impossible. "What? That's not possible. I had a plan. I was going to sell the back 40, he stammered, his polished facade finally cracking. Ms. Hayes simply handed me the signed paperwork, her smile unwavering. "Mr. Jensen, your new mortgage is officially in effect. The old one has been paid in full." The finality in her voice was a clear, sharp blade. Ethan, defeated and humiliated, could only watch as I, the brother in muddy boots, walked out of the bank not as a failure, but as a man who had secured his family's legacy. Driving home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The weight of my father's legacy, which had once felt like a crushing burden, now felt like a well-earned badge of honor. I had faced my brother's betrayal, not with anger and desperation, but with the strength and foresight my father had entrusted to me. The new feeding system was already in the works, and the direct-to-consumer service was generating more interest than we could have imagined. Sarah had joined me full-time, her expertise helping us grow the business beyond anything I had ever dreamed. The rivalry with Ethan wasn't over, not completely, but now it was different. I had proven my value not with words or suits, but with hard work and a deep, abiding love for the land and the life my father had built. My boots were still muddy, a symbol not of failure, but of a man who worked with his hands, built with his heart, and honored the past while forging a better future. I had saved the feedlot, and in doing so, I had finally found my place, not just as a farmer, but as the rightful owner of a legacy I was proud to carry forward. The sun was setting as I pulled into the driveway, casting a golden glow over the fields of home. I looked out at the land, at the barn, at the cattle, and a deep sense of gratitude filled me. I was home and the farm was safe. Dad's legacy was not only secure but thriving, and it was all thanks to a simple plan and a pair of muddy boots that represented a lifetime of honest work. Thank you for following this journey. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Your support helps us keep creating.